Ahoy there, Captain Benzie here, coming at you with a quick public service announcement for EVE Echoes. Now, I've got a video releasing later today at the usual time regarding the Concord Pass and all information on that, so do make sure you are subscribed to the channel with notifications set, ding that bell, set the notifications so that you don't miss that one. But I'm seeing a lot of people, I'm going to say complaining, I'm seeing a lot of people very upset and complaining that they are losing ships in Lowsec, and I kind of want to do a quick throw together video just to explain how to stay safe. I may personally be really excited for this update. I think that making Lowsec dangerous like this is a good change for the community as a whole. I think it's already causing Plex to drop in price, which is awesome, and it's great to see that, you know, people are out there having fun in PvP. But if you are a Lowsec Encounter Runner, I understand it's not fun to be losing ships if you're not sure how to prevent this and how to handle it. So here's the video to give you a quick breakdown on exactly how to do that. Hopefully this will help you survive in Lowsec, and if you've got friends who are struggling to stay alive as well, perhaps you can just send them the link to this video and see if it helps them out too. Because I get it, it's not fun to keep losing ships over and over again if you're not sure what's going on. Now ultimately, with scanning, there are a few points that we need to understand first, and a lot of this video is going to be theoretical, as I've only got a Dramiel to hand, but let's have a look. If I open up the fitting menu and I head to targeting here on the right hand side, you'll see there is a new statistic added here called source radius. This is a key statistic, and every ship has its own unique source radius. If you are running encounters, it is worthwhile right now, whilst you're watching this, open up your fitting menu, look for that source radius, and note it down on a piece of paper. Get used to your ship's source radius, because we're going to be talking about this an awful lot, and I need you to see how this affects and compares to the ship that you are flying. We're going to do a little bit of maths together in this one. Now, whilst every ship has its own unique source radius, it's worth noting that the minimum scan radius and scan radius statistics are based purely on the meta level of the scanner being used, plus any skill. So if I quickly open up the skills here and go into exploration, you'll see I am currently sitting at Space Exploration Technology 554, and what this does is it reduces my minimum scan radius and my scan radius, and we'll talk about those more in just a moment. But first of all then, source radius. Now that you're familiar with what your ship's source radius is, what the actual number is, what does that mean? Well, essentially, everything in EVE now has a source radius. That goes for ships, that goes for planets, it goes for anomalies, encounters. Everything now has a source radius of a certain size, whether it's a dead space anomaly, a asteroid belt, a Capsuleer outpost, or a tiny little frigate hiding somewhere in the distance. Everything has a source radius, and the smaller that source radius is, the more difficult it is to scan. Basically, it is the size of blip that you would make on a scanner, is an easy way to think about it. So now that you understand what source radius is and what your ship's source radius is, let's see how that actually plays in with a narrow resonance scanner, which is the PvP scanning piece of equipment, the module. Now, down here, and this changes again based on meta level and skills trained, so you might find that any that you've got fitted are slightly different to the numbers you see here. You'll see that a narrow resonance scanner has a statistic for minimum scan radius and for scan radius. Now, these are fairly confusingly worded side by side. I do wish that they had a different word for scan radius or something like that, but hey, there we go. This is what we've got to work with. Now, the minimum scan radius is basically the smallest sized object that you can scan, the smallest sized source radius that you can scan. This means if an object has a source radius larger than your minimum scan radius, it will show up on your scanners and you can scan. This means for here, like you see, I've got a minimum scan radius of 137 meters. If a object has a larger source radius than 137 meters, so 138 meters or larger source radius, I can scan it down and I will be able to lock onto it. So based on that 137 meters scan radius, let's compare that to my Dramiel source radius of 113 meters. This means the 113 is smaller than my minimum scan radius of 137. This scanner will not scan down the Dramiel. That is a key point I need you to understand there. Now have a look at your ship's source radius and tell me, can I scan your ship down? If your ship has a larger source radius than 137 meters, this scanner can find you. Next up then is the scan radius. This is a similar stat, but it has a different meaning. The scan radius is the maximum size of ship that will get a notification when I scan it. So if I'm scanning a ship that is 138 meters or larger, I can scan it. That's important. Anything smaller than 137 meters will not show up on my scanner, thanks to the minimum scan radius. If it is larger than my scan radius of 208 meters, then it's not going to get a notification that I've scanned it. This means a ship that is 209 meters or larger is in excess of my minimum scan radius, so I can scan it, and it is larger than my scan radius, so it will not get a notification. So again, look at your ship's source radius. If your ship's source radius is higher than 208 meters, you will not get a notification if I, in this Dramiel, scan you down. Now, again, this minimum scan radius and scan radius is affected only by my personal skills, the space exploration technology skill, the quality of the scanner being used. Here it is a meta level 5 version. Obviously, if I had an Explorer narrow resonance scanner, the scan radius would be even smaller, as would the minimum scan radius. And in certain cases, if we have a look here, for example, at the Magnate Covert Ops, you will see that the Magnate Covert Ops also gets a reduction to its minimum scan radius and its scan radius. Both of those get reduced down there by skills on the Magnate Covert Ops. Other than that, scan radius is only related to the scanner. If I'm on a bigger ship if I'm on a Hurricane using this exact scanner here, this Scholar narrow resonance scanner, it's going to have 208 meter scan radius. If I put it onto a Dominix, it's going to have 208 meter scan radius. If I put it onto the Dramiel, you get the picture, it's all the same there. So, that's a key point. You need to understand how your source radius plays in with the enemy's minimum scan radius and scan radius. This means the bigger the ship is, the bigger its source radius is, the easier it is to scan, and the less likely that ship is going to be notified of this. So, what can you do about that? Well, first things first, if we have a look on the market, there are ways to directly counter this, and I'm going to scroll down to the engineering rigs and to electronic rigs, and we're going to have a look here at the two different types of scan rigs. First of all, we have gravity capacitor upgrades, and you see these reduce the minimum scan radius and scan radius, which helps me, as the aggressor, as the pirate. This helps me have better scanners. The one we're going to talk about today is the Emission scope Sharpener. This will reduce your source radius by 15% at meta level 3. So again, look at your current ship's source radius. Now, take out a calculator and type in that source radius minus 15%. That is what an Emission scope Sharpener would take your source radius down to. Now, compare that source radius, that reduced source radius, with my scan radius of 208. Are you going to be notified when I scan you? That's a key point. You can do the maths on that to figure out how safe you are going to be. Now remember, I am at full 554 on scanning. I am 1 point off having full scanning skills, and I'm using one of the higher tier scanners currently. It does go up another tier above, but this is one of the higher ones around. So consider how easy your ship is to scan, and whether or not you are going to be notified if someone locks you down. Now you probably have three engineering rigs, so then do that again, take off another 15% and then compare it, then take off another 15% and compare it. Can you get that reasonably down to a level where you could be notified about whether or not I am actually scanning you? That's a key point, because that will save your life. If you can get your source radius to a point where even I, with my Dramiel, am not going to be able to scan you without you being alerted, that is going to help keep you safe, because you get a big notification on screen saying the area you are in has been scanned, which means basically prepare to be engaged. Now that happens when I am scanning you, not when I have actually locked down and am warping, so you do have a few seconds to try and get away during that time. But what happens if, well, you're flying something like a Dominix with a very large source radius? What if your source radius, you don't feel you can get it down low enough to actually stop me scanning you down without notifying you? If you can't get it that low, have a look at your navigation rigs and scroll down, because again we have the Warp Core Optimizer rigs. I'm going to look at the Meta Level 3 version here. These are warp jammer strength. We've talked about these at length in the propulsion jamming video, so I do recommend you check that out if you haven't already. But essentially, the lower your warp jammer strength is here on your ship, the easier it is for you to escape, the harder it is for someone to lock you down, because it doesn't matter if they jump into your anomaly, they still need to be able to lock onto you and then blow you up before you escape. If you have a very low warp jammer strength, very high negative numbers, like having 3 of these fitted would give you -9, that means they need to have 10 points or more of warp destabilization. That means they're going to need to have like 3, if not 4, warp scramblers in range. And remember, warp scramblers only have a 15-kilometer range, which means if someone does jump in, they're still going to need to close the gap, get to within 15 kilometers, and then apply all of those onto you. Now, yeah, if someone is jumping in a fleet of ships, they very well may be able to do that. They may be able to exceed your warp jammer strength and stop you warping away. That's why you need to decide which of those 2 routes is going to be better for you. But remember, warp stability doesn't end there. If we have a look at our low slots as well, I can have a look down. I've got to remember what it's under. I think it's under thruster upgrades. There we are. We then have warp core stabilizers. And again, I'm going to look at the Aura warp core stabilizer. By having this fitted to your ship, it gives you an additional -2 warp jammer strength. You can then activate it for another -2 warp jammer strength. So just as an example, imagine you'd fitted 3 of those warp core those warp core optimizer rigs. You've got -9. You then have 1 of these fitted, that takes you down to -11. You can then activate it to take you to -13, meaning your opponents need to have a warp jammer strength of 14 to lock you down, with 3 rigs and 1 low slot. And these, if we have a look at their price on the market, are not overly expensive at all. You just need to decide what you can take out of your low slots to add additional safety. It means that yes, you may have to take away something like a drone damage amplifier or a ballistic control unit or something like that, lower your DPS in order to add safety. Now, again, you can now look at that and say, okay, I can reach a certain level of stability on my ship thanks to the rigs and warp core stabilizer low slot modules, but what happens if a massive fleet jumps in and they all somehow get close enough to lock me down before I have a chance to warp out and I don't have enough warp stability? Well, this is why you have the local option here. If you have this open, you'll be able to see who else is in your current system. You'll see that currently, there is no one in my system. This is me a deal in every shore. There is no one else in this system other than me. But if there were 4 other players in the system, I'm going to be able to see that in local. I've got the number 1 here on the left-hand side, and you can see there is just Captain Benzie in local. If someone else joins, that number 1 will go to a 2, and another name will appear in local. So if you're running an encounter and there are 6 people in local, and then it goes up to 7 or 8 people, you probably know that your warp stability is going to be enough to help keep you safe from 2 people. If that's 2 people coming to scan you down and scram you, that's only going to be, so many points of warp stability. You can work that out and gauge whether or not that's safe. If the number jumps from 6 people in local up to 12 people in local, that is your key to jump to a gate as quickly as possible. If you don't think that your warp stability is going to be sufficient to stop the sudden spike in local from getting you, warp the heck out. That is a key point. You've got 3 different systems there that you can use. You can try and make your ship small enough on its source radius so that it either cannot be scanned or it cannot be scanned without warning. You can then choose instead to go for the warp stability route so that even if they do scan you down, when they jump in, you have enough warp stability to be able to flee to safety. And you can watch local to make sure that if a group larger than you can handle jumps in, you can flee to safety. I'm seeing a lot of people saying, oh, there's no counterplay in this, the rigs aren't good enough for what I need, there's no counterplay. There's 3 points of counterplay, and you have all 3 levels at your disposal, no matter what ship you are flying. The 4th option is that if you are still completely unsatisfied with this, ask a friend in something like a frigate to come along with you. Because that frigate, especially if it's something like a probe covert ops or a Dramiel that has a very small source radius, they are going to get notified that someone is scanning, and then they can let you know and you can warp to safety immediately. That is now 4 different ways that you can do this. Either fly with a friend or change your fit. There are ways to do this. Does it mean it's ideal? No. Right now, the exploration update is fresh in everyone's minds. Everyone wants to try it out. There are some rather large, like wolf packs, drifting around Lowsec, basically making life a living nightmare for people running Lowsec encounters. As such, it might be worth it for the next few days, maybe a week or so, that you stop doing the Lowsec encounters and you just stick to high-sec for the time being until the initial surge of interest in scanning dies down. Otherwise, those 4 points again, once you are doing Lowsec encounters, either see if you can reduce your source radius so that you are unscannable, or at least that you get notified when someone is scanning you. Check to see if you can fit warp stability to make you safe from being locked down so that you can run and escape to a local gate. If you cannot rig for that, consider adding the additional warp core stabilizer low slots in order to achieve that amount. The third option is to keep an eye on local, and if you see a big spike in local that means you are no longer safe from warp scrambling, that spike has more ships than you have warp stability, for example, then you can see that spike and use that as your red flag to get out to safety. And if that doesn't work, then bring a friend who can notify you when you are scanned. That is why Lowsec is dangerous now, and there are ways around it, and I hope this video gives you some ideas of how you can handle this. As I said, I probably will sit down and do a more formal video on this later on, probably a Catskull Academy one, but for the time being, I just wanted something quick to throw out to teach you all how source radius interacts with the narrow the narrow resonance scanners, and how you can defend your ships, and how you can try and stay safe in Lowsec. I really hope that helps. Let me know in the comment section down below if you've got any other ideas and other options as well there. I would love to hear how you guys are finding this. Hope it helps. Share this with your friends if they're having difficulties. Otherwise, happy sailing and see you in New Eden.